Today we're taking a look at the Max Toy Company Shin Godzilla Sofubi toy. As is the case with many Sofubi toy releases, there are various iterations of the same sculpt. This particular version that we're looking at today is the 2023 Summer Wonder Festival version, which is actually made in a clear orange vinyl with some black paint and gold paint accents as well. In terms of the sculpt, this is a very stylized piece, and it's also one of the smaller Shin Godzilla figures that I have. Now, I knew this one coming in. The Max Toy Company figures are on the smaller side. I think this one's just about 4¼ inches tall, so it's smaller than even the X Plus Deforeal Shin Godzilla, but you'll see some size comparisons later. But just because this figure's small doesn't mean that it's lacking in any detail. If anything, I find that it's a little bit more detailed than some of my other Shin Godzilla Sofubi toys. Offhand, I know the Marmot one, despite being more than double the size of this figure, has pretty soft detail. I do think it's lacking that department. I still like that figure, but this one, interestingly, despite being so much smaller, is just so much more detailed. And I hope you see in the footage here how the translucent vinyl, I think, really brings that through as well, because you have this beautiful natural light that shines through, and we'll see through the review how that kind of adds that depth to the figure. One thing that's interesting to me about this figure is that I really like it front facing, like just head on. Normally with, I think, almost every Shin Godzilla figure I have, I like keeping it at some sort of angle, and I think the design in general benefits from looking at it from certain angled shots, not necessarily head on. But there's something about this front facing look of this particular sculpt that I really like a lot. It's just the overall shape of the figure. Of course, you know, it looks like Shin Godzilla, but it's very condensed because he's very stout, but it has this very visually appealing look front-facing to me. Part of that, I think, is the shape of the head, and then also the way the hands, well, the hands are posable, which we'll see a little bit later, but the way I have it in these particular shots, I don't know, it just does something for me that I really like a lot. One of the defining characteristics of this particular figure, to me, I think, is the exaggerated smile that's extremely prominent on this head sculpt. In fact, I think it takes up a significant portion of the overall head itself. You'll notice that, of course, this Godzilla has gold teeth, which at first I was a little iffy about, but it's grown on me because I think it fits this colorway very well. And it almost kind of looks like Godzilla's wearing a grill here, but it looks cool. They really captured that insanely strange smile that Shin Godzilla has, and the overall shape of the head itself, I think, really captures that mushroom cloud look. The eyes are done very well too, and like I said, this is already a small figure, so the eyes are even tinier, but it does capture that great look of Shin Godzilla. What's interesting to me, I think, with collecting so many different iterations of Shin Godzilla figures, particularly stylized ones, you can kind of get different expressions on these figures. This one, depending on the angle, you can almost see he looks angry. There are points that I think he looks almost anxious, and I think the smile either looks like an evil smile or a happy smile, so it's interesting. I love these kind of stylized versions of Shin Godzilla because he's so grotesque, in the film, so you do have an interesting mix of cute and grotesque, which, I don't know, just this figure really taps into that very well. In terms of the paint, this is a relatively simple paint scheme. Like I said, it's mostly painted black. I do think there actually is some brown paint in it now that I take a closer look. We have gold teeth, the eyes are white and black, and the toenails are painted gold as well. Unfortunately, one of the nails on the right foot of this figure is slightly chipped. It came that way, but it's not the end of the world. The hands, interestingly enough, do not have painted fingernails. Instead, it's just the brown-black paint with the orange vinyl. But I think the overall aesthetic is very pleasing. But I gotta say, in hand, this thing really does have a great appearance to it. I love shining it through light. You'll see throughout the video how light bounces off of it and just accentuates the paint and just those beautiful details throughout the whole thing. I am curious to see other versions of this figure in other colorways. I think this orange color is a lot of fun. This is the only clear orange Sofubi toy that I have, I think, of any Godzilla, not just Shin Godzilla. So it's a great new color to add into the collection. But I would love to see other versions of this figure in maybe like clear blue, maybe clear gray. And I'm sure as I've panned through this figure in the entire review so far, you've noticed all this detail that I've been talking about. But as we take a closer look once more, they really did capture all these striations and crevices that are present on Shin Godzilla. I always love the chest and neck sections of Shin Godzilla figures, whether realistic or stylized, because I think that that's the area that has some of the most differing textures in it. We of course have that pointed chest, which is a little more rounded on this particular version. But we have that amazing line work on the front of the chest. Then we make our way into the throat and neck section. We have those gills and the different lines feeding from the shoulder, the chest, and the back, kind of all meeting in one section and working its way up to the head. From the side and these angles here, you can get a better sense of what the dorsals and the tail look like. The dorsal plates do have a more rounded appearance to them, but they look great. And the tail itself, while being shorter, still manages to capture all that great detail. We have the varying textures on the underside of the tail, and then on the top side, the dorsals feed into it. And let's get a closer look at the tip of the tail there. They even managed to get that face there. Maybe a little tricky to see because of that lighting and clear vinyl, but it is there. This figure also has a very pleasing silhouette, no matter which side that you look at it. And of course, the tail becomes more prominent as we look at it from the angles and from the full profile. The particular pose they chose for this tail is, of course, akin to that iconic look of the tail being more upright and swinging behind Shin Godzilla. Of course, it's not proportional to the figure itself. It's very stylized and condensed, but I like that because it doesn't take up a lot of space. But depending on the angle you shoot it at, it does still give that appearance of that long tail that is swinging, especially with the curvature toward the tip of the tail. Now, in terms of the articulation, this figure actually has 4 points, and it's not exactly where you might think that they normally would be. The head is unarticulated, and so are the legs, but the hands, the waist, and the tail are articulated. So you can have a very static-looking Shin Godzilla, but you can also pose this figure in some fun ways too. You can get the tail to kind of swing around from the back and swivel the waist a little bit so you can get him to look like he's turning. And you'll see here in this footage how I kind of played around a little bit with the different poses. Even if it was unarticulated, I'm totally happy with the way it already looks, kind of just front-facing in that very static pose. But the fact that you can do that with this figure and kind of just move it around and put it in these wacky positions just makes this one a lot more fun. One thing I also like about the hand articulation is that you can very much achieve that hand to the sky appearance. I feel like you don't get that a lot with Shin Godzilla figures in general. So you can, like I said, have them very upright or very much clenched inward. And it does very much give that sense of the hands being very gripped and tight. So I think the sculpt on the hands in particular are a high point for this figure. So what are my overall thoughts on this figure? Well, I think this is a total home run. It is such a cool figure. It's so fun. Sure, it's tiny, yes, but it makes up for it with so much detail and personality. And the posing on this figure is so fun. It's not something that I feel like you see often in Sofubi toy versions of Shin Godzilla. And again, this is not a colorway that I normally would have jumped on right away, but I'm honestly happy that I did. I don't have any orange vinyl in the collection up until now, let alone for Shin Godzilla figures. So I think this one is even more unique in that respect among my other Shin figures. They're pretty hard to come by because my understanding is that they're typically sold via one-day licenses at Japanese festivals. So they're not sold often, and when they are sold, they sell out really fast. So the best way, if you're not in Japan, to get these is likely in the aftermarket, or I guess if you know somebody who somehow has access to these kind of figures. But if you're a Shin fanatic like me, you like stylized figures as much as realistic ones, this one is a home run. I think no matter what colorway you get, the sculpt itself is just fantastic. Again, I'm so happy I got it. What do you guys think about this figure? Do you have any version of it, or are you thinking of getting a version of this figure? Leave your comments down below. Anyway, this is going to be it for the review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel and you like the content, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and taking a look at my other Godzilla figure content on the channel as well. And lastly, thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.